In the sun-drenched capital of Italy, Rome, there was a large table under a roof set for 12. The white tablecloth, silver cutlery, and the reflections in the wine glasses looked almost like a painting. But I wasn't there. Well, technically, I was in the restaurant, but I didn't have a seat at the table. No plate, no napkin, and no small card with my name on it. Just an empty space. And that emptiness wasn't just physical. It was the exact reflection of the emptiness that opened up inside me at that moment. My husband, Julian, smiled slightly, acting as though he was a little embarrassed. "Oh my God," he said. "I think we've counted one person short." Everyone at the table burst out laughing. Some laughed politely, others openly entertained. But they all gave the same message. "You're not wanted here, Elise." Something tightened in my throat. My eyes met the victorious gaze of my mother-in-law, Barbara. It was as if she was watching the first act of a show she had planned for months. I shrugged my shoulders and put a neutral expression on my face. My heart was racing, but my voice was calm. "I guess I'm not considered family," I said. And I turned around and walked out. Neither Julian called out, nor did anyone follow me. Only the clinking of glasses and faint murmurs remained behind me. But when I stepped outside, I didn't cry. No, never. Instead, I took out my phone and started using the greatest power my job had given me after all these years: planning. I, Elise Wagner, was the founder and manager of one of Europe's most prestigious event agencies. Luxury weddings, high-profile company launches, ministries, and aristocratic families. I was behind it all. And now, I had only 30 minutes. I moved away from the restaurant, but not too far. I sat at a small cafe across the street. My heart was still pounding. But my hands were no longer shaking. They hadn't given me a seat at that table. But now I was setting the stage for everything to be solved, step by step. I would go back. But not the way they expected. I was going to make a move that would ruin the game they set up for me. When I met Julian, everything was different. It was 6 years ago. We met at a charity ball in Dusseldorf. I was the event coordinator that evening, and he was Barbara Wagner's successful and charming investor son. Even his handkerchief was a symbol of measured politeness. His speech, his interest, even his laughter seemed carefully chosen. "Are you the one behind this amazing event?" he had asked me. And I believed the sincerity in his question was real. What started that night slowly turned into a serious relationship. Julian would always say he admired my work. "It's a miracle to find someone like you," he would say. It took some time for me to meet his family. But eventually, they accepted me. Well, on the surface. I'll never forget Barbara's look at our first dinner. She slowly placed her wine glass on the table, scanned me from head to toe, and said, "How nice, a hard-working woman. Where are you from?" you said. In that moment, I realized my background didn't belong to their circle. Our marriage didn't go badly at first. Julian was immersed in his work, but I was growing my agency, signing major events across Europe. Everything seemed perfect from the outside. But over time, Barbara's little games began. At the last minute, working with another agency on an event I had planned. Presenting my job as a fun hobby when introducing me to guests. And Julian trying to silence me by always explaining it away as his mother's grumpiness. But that evening in Rome, that was the final straw. I had worked for a year on Barbara's 70th birthday celebration. Venue selection, menus, guest lists, special transportation details. I did it all. I did my best because this event wasn't just a job for me, it was a chance to prove myself. But they left me with nothing but an empty seat. They chose to exclude me as they had planned. They declared me someone outside this family, but what they didn't know was this. I am the woman who built an empire from that emptiness. They underestimated my organizational power. And now, while they try to have fun with their glasses in hand, I am slowly preparing to reverse this stage. And this is just the beginning. As I sat at the corner table of the cafe, my espresso in front of me was slowly cooling, but the fire inside me was only growing hotter. I wasn't going back, at least not the way they expected. This wasn't just about honor. It was a battle to reclaim the identity I had built over the years. And I knew how to fight. My phone's screen lit up. I opened my apps, all the reservation details with Ilmer Restaurant, payment approvals, signed contracts. They were all under my name. Credit card information, transfer authorizations, menu approval documents. With just one touch, I could reverse it all. And that's exactly what I was going to do. I sent the email I had prepared in advance to the restaurant manager, Enzo. The subject line was clear: urgent, cancellation of today's reservation and withdrawal of payment guarantee. I attached all the necessary documents, my company ID number, payment authorization codes, and cancellation instructions. In the Italian restaurant world, respect comes before money. I had worked with names like Enzo based on trust. He would do what was needed. Within half an hour, while champagne glasses were being raised at the table, that celebratory evening would silently begin to collapse. Next step, the other reservations. The private wine tour set for the next day, canceled. The evening boat tour along the Amalfi Coast 3 days later, canceled. The weekend celebration planned at a private villa in Tuscany, canceled. The guided Vatican tour, boutique shopping tours, even the reservations for the private chauffeur-driven Mercedes minivans. I canceled them all and withdrew the deposits from my company account. I had made all these reservations. All payments had passed through my agency. They had only given their names, showing their glittering faces, but they had forgotten who truly held the power. They would remember now. The first message from Julian came just then. "Where are you? Please come back. This is just a misunderstanding." I didn't reply. Another message followed immediately. "Mom is upset. She wanted you to be at the table." A bitter smile formed on my face. What a big deception. The last message was more nervous. "Tomorrow's schedule has been canceled. Do you know what's going on?" Oh, I knew so much, Julian. And this was just the beginning. I looked at my watch. 27 minutes had passed. It was time to prepare for the final scene. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in my blue satin dress. I headed to the hotel. As I passed through the hotel's glass door, I noticed the receptionist bowing respectfully to me. There were still people in this city who knew who I was, and those people weren't going to forget this night. In my room, I stood before the mirror. I lightly applied some highlighter under my eyes. I defined my lips with a dark color fitting for the night. And then the dress. Dark navy, off the shoulder, custom designed with Italian lace. Tonight, the stage was mine. Every event I had planned over the years to elevate them was preparing me for this moment. When I returned to the restaurant, music and laughter were rising from inside. As if nothing had happened, their perfect evening was still going on. When I walked in, I used the back service entrance, a little detail the event world had taught me. The best scenes are watched from behind the curtain. Enzo greeted me in the back kitchen. He had a mixed expression on his face. "Signora Wagner, everything is ready. I'm waiting for the signal," he said. He showed me the reservation screen on his tablet. Payment rejected. Guarantor company withdrawn. I nodded. 5 minutes. Just 5 more minutes. I need to see everything. Enzo led me to a spot where I could see the table through a small window opening into the kitchen. At the head of the table was Barbara, sitting like the Empress of Rome, wearing her pearl necklace. Julian sat beside her, participating in conversations with a fake smile. Other family members seemed happy. The first course, the truffle risotto Barbara had specially requested, was being served. I was no longer outside this picture. I was the real director behind this scene. I took my phone out of my pocket. I wrote a single message to Enzo. "Now." And the game began. As soon as Enzo read the message, time seemed to freeze. At first, nothing changed in the ambiance of the restaurant. The music was still playing. The flickering light from the candles fell like gold on the tablecloths. But then, small things started to go wrong. One of the waiters, walking slowly, approached the table and leaned over to Richard, who was sitting across from Barbara. He whispered something in his ear. Richard nodded at first, then furrowed his brow. His eyes widened. That's when the chain reaction began. Richard pulled out his wallet, looked at the tablet in the waiter's hand, and hurriedly said something. The waiter shook his head negatively and called for an older colleague. That person was Enzo. Now Enzo was at the very center of the restaurant, and control was completely in his hands. With the tablet in his hand, he was explaining something to the people at the table while the waiters quietly pulled back. The service had stopped. Barbara slowly placed her spoon on the edge of her plate. The bracelet on her wrist jingled lightly. For the first time, there was real concern in her eyes. She leaned over and whispered to Julian. "What's happening?" Julian grabbed his phone. At that moment, the notification that dropped into his inbox made his eyes narrow. The moment he read it, his face drained of color. He wasn't just shocked anymore. He was afraid. The message on the screen read, "All payments have been canceled by my company. All reservations have been withdrawn. The weekly schedule has collapsed. And you deprived me of a seat. I hope you liked that seat, because this could be your last dinner tonight." Julian panicked and jumped to his feet. His chair fell to the ground. All eyes were now on him. Enzo began speaking, this time louder. "Dear guests, I regret to inform you that all payments for tonight's event have been withdrawn. The reservation guarantee has been canceled. We cannot proceed without payment." A murmur rose in the room. Guests at other tables turned their heads to watch this small bourgeois disaster unfold. In one of Rome's most prestigious restaurants, a German aristocratic family was experiencing a full-blown fiasco. An Italian-style scandal. Barbara stood up, her voice cracking as she spoke. "How could this happen? This is our night! Enzo, who are you to do this to us?" Enzo simply shrugged. "Your organizer withdrew the payment guarantee, Signora. She had the legal right to do so. Everything is documented. I'm sure if you wish, you can proceed with your own payment method." Barbara's hands trembled. She reached for her wallet, but Enzo immediately shook his head. "No, madam. For this kind of event, we only accept payment in advance. Without transfer approval from your company account, we cannot continue." Julian grabbed his phone again and started dialing. On the screen, Elise was flashing. At that moment, I was his only way out. I answered, but my voice was cold as ice. "What do you want, Julian?" "What does this mean, Elise? For God's sake, what have you done? My mom is in shock. Dad is about to faint. The guests, everyone is watching." "You didn't want me to be watched," I said. "But now, all eyes are on you. You'll never forget this night. You'll remember my empty seat very well. Elise, this is not a game anymore. This is a disaster for the family. Our image, our investments." My eyes looked out from the small crack in the kitchen door. I saw Barbara's hand move to her necklace, Melissa lowering her head, Richard spreading out his credit cards across the table. "Your image?" I said mockingly. "Interesting. I was just a decoration for you. Now the decor is ruined. The stage is yours." "Elise, please come back. I can explain. Things with Vanessa. It's more complicated." Instead of emptiness inside me, there was now a strange feeling of freedom. I chose my freedom, not your explanation, Julian. And tonight was its celebration. I ended the call, and there was no need to wait anymore. I turned and walked out of the dark corner of the kitchen toward the dining room. My posture was upright. With every step, one more pair of eyes turned toward me. At that moment, everyone who had tried to exclude me was realizing who the real outsider was. Barbara was the first to speak. Her voice was filled with anger, but also with a hint of trembling. "How dare you? This is my birthday night." I approached her with the inner calm of the woman who had spent years preparing stages. "I learned that from you, Barbara. But you planned the stage. I wrote the finale." And that night, under the Roman sky, in front of the crowded table, all the roles changed. The sound of my heels echoed on the marble floor of the restaurant, cutting through the silence at the table and commanding the attention of the entire evening. They had thought I was being ignored. But now, I was the woman rising right before their eyes. When I returned, I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was like a general commanding my own battle. Barbara was still standing, but she no longer resembled a queen. She had placed her hand on her precious necklace, quickly removing it in a moment of panic and putting it into her purse. She was trying to act as if her entire image hadn't collapsed in just a few minutes. Julian, still frozen with his phone in hand, didn't even look up at me. I met his gaze. That look was the final punctuation of the silence that had lasted for years. "What do you want?" Melissa asked, her voice sharp and defensive. My answer was clear. "Nothing. I'm just returning to my own life. I'm not in your circle. but I'm at the center of my own." Richard grumbled. "This is a disgrace. You have no right to ruin such a night." I didn't change the expression on my face. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a small black folder. Inside were some of the documents I had been gathering for months, the proof of all the financial truths. I opened the silver clasp and placed the folder on the table. "Feel free to open it. There are documents showing your investment funds collapsing, recent transfers to offshore accounts, loans secured against your properties in Germany. And Julian, my dear husband, the divorce proposal you plan to offer me. It was going to be presented as a, quote, mutual agreement. There's even a handwritten document. Very thoughtful of you." Julian reached for the folder, but before he could, I took out the second item from my bag, my cell phone. "Everything is also recorded digitally. It's with my lawyer. If you take any legal action against me, it'll hit the press. It'll be sent to the tax authorities. And by the way, the baby issue with Vanessa? It's documented too. Let's note that as well." A sudden chill filled the room. Barbara seemed to lose her breath. Thomas leaned over to Melissa and whispered something. The faces of the siblings were now pale. In that moment, I understood. These people thought they controlled everything. But now, they no longer had control. Julian tried to speak. "Elise, do you know what this is going to cost us?" I shook my head. "Of course, I know, because I calculated it. Just like you tried to destroy me, but I didn't want to destroy you. I just wanted to exist. But you saw that as a threat." Barbara made another attempt. This time her voice was shaking, but she still insisted. "What was someone like you doing in this family anyway? Besides your organizational skills, what did you rely on?" I calmly expressed my answer. "My humanity, my honor, my patience, my fight to belong. But I'm not anyone's possession anymore, especially not in this rotten system." I extended my hand and winked at Enzo. At that moment, the waiters approached the table. "Dear guests," Enzo said with a refined but firm tone, "your reservation for the table has been canceled. Service will stop until payment is made. If payment is not made, the table will have to be vacated." Barbara frantically started rummaging through her purse. She opened her wallet, but none of the cards were accepted. Julian handed over all his cards one by one, but they were all rejected, because all guarantees had been withdrawn. As a last resort, Barbara took off the vintage Bulgari bracelet from her wrist and offered it to Enzo. "Is this enough?" she asked him. Enzo bowed his head. "For now, we can accept this as collateral, but if payment isn't made by tomorrow, the jewelry will be placed in the safe." The silence at the table had turned into a painful acceptance. I turned to Julian one last time. "Well, this is the final scene of your celebration. Have fun." I turned my back and started walking, but this wasn't an escape, it was an ascension. On my way back to the hotel, messages started flooding in. "Julian, please, this can be undone. We can talk. Barbara, what you've done is pure revenge. You've proven your ordinariness. Melissa, you've humiliated us, but this won't end here. Richard, we'll be consulting with our lawyers. This is a declaration of war." I didn't reply. I simply sent all the documents to my lawyer, ensuring they were placed under legal protection. Then I silenced my phone. In my own room, in my own bed, as the owner of my own life, for the first time, I would sleep freely. When I landed in Boston, the coolness of the September morning hit my face. But there was a strange calmness inside me. As I left the airport, my feet seemed to hit the ground more firmly. After years of living in a world where I ignored my own existence, I was finally breathing, on my own terms, with my own steps and my own decisions. When I got into the Uber, I didn't type in the address of the brownstone I used to live in with Julian. I now had an address of my own, a new beginning, right across from Beacon Hill, a simple yet elegant apartment. It was a one-bedroom, but it was peaceful. When selecting the furniture, it wasn't about showing off. It was about serenity, harmony, and freedom. There was no Barbara in that apartment. No voice saying, "Elise, we don't do things like that here." It was just me. And, for the first time, that was enough. I spent my first days dealing with moving and trying to collect my thoughts. When the moving company arrived, I clearly told them, Take only the things that are mine. Everything else stays in the past. My first book collection, bought with my own money, notebooks from my school years, a small painting I bought with my dad at an antique shop, my personal jewelry. They were all memories, but they were mine. The memories I had shaped. The first messages from Julian were surprising. Classic, panic-written, result-oriented sentences. What do you want? We can sit down and talk. We can fix this. Just come back. But it was too late. What I wanted to fix now wasn't my marriage. It was my life. My lawyer had stepped in. All the documents in my name, digital evidence, and bank transaction records had been organized. The exact date each agreement was canceled, which reservation was made in whose name, and which account transferred how many euros, all of it was recorded. And most importantly, documents bearing Julian's signature, detailing the mutual agreement divorce scenario. The dates? They went way back. That theatrical empty chair had been in the works for a long time. These documents were now my shield. At first, the media only skimmed the surface. The Caldwell family had an unpleasant dinner in Rome. Then, an article circulated around Boston. Allegations of misconduct at Caldwell Investments. Leaks started. Secret accounts, possible tax evasion, jewels used as collateral in Italy, and of course, Vanessa's pregnancy. One of the magazine headlines was, "Ex-girlfriend expecting a child from a married man. The Caldwell family is facing tough times." Meanwhile, I focused on my work. My inbox at the agency was locked. First, small clients reached out. Then, suddenly, rich women, who had once looked down on me while being around Barbara, started sending meeting requests through their assistants. One of my clients openly said, "We don't just want organization anymore. We need strategy. You didn't just bring down a table, you brought down an empire." Those words echoed inside me. The people who had seen me as mere decoration were now coming to me as a consultant. The Caldwell family was crumbling. Richard's mild heart attack had become a joke in their social circles. Barbara canceled the annual gala she had organized for years because the sponsors had pulled out. Melissa was having a crisis in her own marriage, secretly meeting with lawyers to prevent it from going public. And Julian, he was still trying to reach me. "Come back," he said. "Elise, we can get through this together. The Vanessa situation is not as it seems," but it didn't concern me anymore. One day, a large, thick envelope arrived in my mailbox. The sender, Barbara Caldwell. Inside, a formal invitation. "We kindly request you submit your proposal for organizing our annual charity gala." I stared at the envelope silently for a few minutes. Then I laughed. It was a laugh filled with all the bitterness, suppressed pride, and the sound of being right that had been trapped inside me for years. I wrote a polite reply. "Dear Caldwell, our schedule is unfortunately full. However, we would be happy to offer our support on a different date. Best regards." That night, I opened the window of my new apartment. A light breeze hit my face. As the streetlights cast a quiet calm, I poured myself a glass of wine and wrote the following in my journal. I didn't fight to sit in the chair they excluded me from. That chair's emptiness showed me that I needed to make space for myself. And now, that emptiness is my throne. Boston's winter made even the gray sky feel clear to me. The snowflakes I watched through the window seemed to gently cover the past. Nothing was the same anymore. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want anything to be the same. The divorce was official. The lawyers had signed the papers. And our connection had ended not just on paper, but emotionally as well. Julian had quietly withdrawn from the scene. His family, on the other hand, was crumbling under their own weight in public. But I was outside of that wreckage now. I was free. While in my new office, a young woman I was consulting with asked me, "Elise, how did you stay on your feet? How did you rebuild after such a huge collapse?" Without hesitating, I replied, "Because I never lost what was mine. I was just temporarily silenced." It was in that moment that I realized the people who tried the hardest to hurt me were the ones who helped me find my voice. I no longer needed a single chair, because I had the power to exist wherever I wanted. I didn't need to be called to the table. I was the one who set it. At the end of that winter, I went back to Italy. I was planning a wedding on the Amalfi Coast. The sky was lowering toward the sea. There was a light in the air that seemed to disappear between blue and silver. As I walked alone on the terrace, I thought about a few years ago. The evening in Rome, the empty chair, the silence, the feeling of being excluded that had seeped into me. And then I saw today, a woman who had paved her own path, strong with her own name, free with her own story. At the moment the waves crashed on the shore, I made a decision. I would no longer carry the role that the past had assigned to me. My only responsibility now was to write my own scene. My phone rang. A new client, a new project. This time, an International Women's Leadership Summit. I thought for a moment, I will help raise others' voices instead of the ones that tried to silence me. And at that exact moment, I looked up and gazed at the sky. The wind gently tousled my hair. I whispered to myself, I wasn't excluded from a table. I built a whole new world. In this world, no one could silence me anymore. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. In every news story, we continue to explore the power of freedom, courage, and new beginnings together. Share your thoughts with us in the comments, because every voice is a part of this journey. See you in the next story.